This is a 2016 McLaren 570S. It's the baby McLaren, the entry-level McLaren. The McLaren you're going to be able to buy in about 5 years for the same price as a new 911. Today I'm going to find out if you should. I've borrowed this 570S from Exclusive Automotive Group, which is a great group of car enthusiasts here at Bentley and Aston Martin of Washington, D.C. Now, this car has about 2,000 miles on it, and it's listed for just under $190,000, which is big money, but prices are creeping down. And it's already a bargain compared to the 570S's bigger brother, the 650S, which starts around $270,000 before plentiful McLaren options.
And so here are the details. The 570S is the base model in McLaren's US lineup, and it uses the same 3.8-liter twin-turbo V8 as basically every single other McLaren in history. In the 570S, it makes 562 horsepower and 443 pound-feet of torque, and it puts up some amazing performance numbers, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, and a top speed of more than 200 miles an hour. Not a lot of entry-level models are doing 200 miles an hour.
As usual, I'm going to give you a tour of this car and show you all of its quirks and cool features. And there are a lot of quirks and cool features. And then I'm going to take it out on the road and tell you how I think it drives. And of course, click the link below to visit autotrader.com/oversteer for more of my thoughts on the 570S and for an article about the cheapest McLarens I've found currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. I'll start with the door. Now, the last McLaren I reviewed, the MP412C, you slid your hand under the door and it just popped open, which was cool, but kind of a gimmick, and also you had to explain to everybody who got in your car how to open the door. This thing is a little bit more normal. There's a little rubber button under here. You push it, and the door opens right up. And things only get crazier from here. For example, one of the craziest things is right here. There are two little buttons on the door. One of them puts the car in tow mode so the alarm doesn't go crazy when you tow it. The other one has a little symbol on it like it opens the engine cover, except in the 570S, the engine cover isn't designed to open. I'm serious. So what does this button do? When you push it, watch back there. That's right, instead of an engine cover opening, all you get is this thing. You pop it open and you can add water or oil. You can't actually access the engine without removing a couple of bolts and pulling that whole cover off manually. Now, once you're inside this car, getting out is easier than it is in some weird doored cars. All you gotta do is pull a little lever right next to the window switches and you're out. But these doors are electronic, and so what happens if the battery is dead and you're trying to get out? Well, of course McLaren has thought of that. There's a little door pull back here, a manual lever. You just unbutton it and then pull it hard and the door will come right open mechanically. Now, once you get inside, you'll quickly discover that the 570S has no glove box. I always love it when exotic cars don't have a glove box because it's like the automaker thinks, oh God, people are going to get mad we don't have a glove box. We better come up with a lot of other weird places to put storage. And this car is no exception.
For example, down here, you'll find what has to be the world's smallest cup holder, both in terms of width and height under the infotainment system. In the middle, there's a tremendously narrow center console that can't hold much, though it has 3 USB ports for some reason. In the door, what's that? Just a regular old door panel? Nope, it's a little storage area where you can hide stuff. But the biggest storage area is in back, behind the seats, where there's a shelf with a surprising amount of space for your stuff.
Speaking of the seats, one of the most interesting things about this 570S is that the seats are manual. It's a $200,000 car, and it doesn't have power seats. But you'll quickly discover that the seats are just about the only thing in this car that doesn't have some sort of really cool high-tech solution.
For example, the gauge cluster. On the left side is a menu where you can cycle through all sorts of functions. You can change even the smallest details if you find the right menu, like, for example, the footwell lighting. Now it's 6 instead of 7. Perfect. There are a lot of different pictures, and you have to kind of go into each one to figure out what they all do, but there's some cool stuff lurking in there. You can even use this menu to raise and lower the front of the car to clear bumps. It's all activated down here by this small lever sticking out of the steering column that goes down, up, forwards, or backwards, or you can press OK at the end of the stalk to agree to a message. Kind of cool, kind of complicated, definitely high tech. As for the rest of the gauge cluster, forget actual gauges. This little display monitors your vehicle temperatures. Green rings are okay, yellow or red means there's a problem. On the right, more digital gauges, and you gotta admit, those look pretty cool.
But none of those things inside that advanced gauge cluster are my favorite feature. My favorite feature is one of the coolest attention to detail items I've ever seen inside an exotic car. When you turn off the 570S, a little indicator comes on the gauge cluster that shows you how many days you can park the car for. You see, owners of cars like these often have 10, 12, 15 supercars, and they don't always have a lot of time to drive them, so they often sit for a while undriven. In this car, it tells you exactly how many days you can let it sit without driving it before the battery goes flat. That's really cool, and it shows that McLaren really understands their customer. Next up is another one of my favorite 570S features. That would be the turn signal stalk and the wiper stalk. Now, most people don't realize it, but turn signal stalks, interior buttons, that sort of thing are very expensive for automakers to develop. So most car companies, probably like in your car, just go with rather boring looking ones, but not McLaren. These things are beautiful, and they're also really cool looking, and they're cool to touch. And they even have holes in them. But my favorite one is the wiper stalk. Not only is it beautiful and cool looking and attractive, but it also says on it fast, slow, auto, off. So there's absolutely no guesswork when you're putting on your wipers exactly which setting you're turning it to. Next, we move on to the center of the 570S, where there are, of course, more high-tech gadgets and features, this time to control your drive mode. Now, there's one switch marked P for powertrain and one marked H for handling, and both of those switches have 3 settings on them: normal, sport, and track. And you're supposed to be able to toggle between them, except there's a little problem.
Namely, when you do the toggling, nothing happens. You move the switch and no display comes on to let you know any setting has changed. And on the gauge screen, it even says mode change unavailable. Is this thing broken? Nope, just classic high-tech McLaren. To change the modes, you must first press the active button, which then lights up. After that, you can change the switches to your heart's content, and you can even enter my favorite mode, track, which changes the entire look of the gauge screen to be more suitable for racetrack driving. It even gives you fuel as a percentage so you know when to make a pit stop. As for the rest of the center controls, they aren't that interesting. There's a starter button on top, then the switches. There's launch mode on the left and a start-stop mode button on the right. Even McLaren isn't immune from fuel economy regulations. Then in the middle, there's the transmission selector, which is just a bunch of buttons that you push.
The 570S is so advanced that it doesn't even have normal controls for the power mirrors or the parking sensors. Take a look at this. Right here is the power mirror switch. It's actually fairly similar to what you'd find on a normal car, except it's ringed in this circle of light. That would be the parking sensors. You push it and you can turn on and off the parking sensors. That is really cool, but let's be honest, it's not like you're really ever going to be pushing the button that turns the parking sensors on and off. So why can't they just make that a regular old button like everybody else? I guess that wouldn't be the McLaren way. Next, we exit the 570S to take a look at some of its exterior quirks, like, for example, my favorite McLaren Easter egg. The turn signals in back are shaped like the McLaren logo. You can't say that's not kind of cool. That's also true up front. Take a look at the front turn signals and you'll see that they too mimic the shape of the McLaren logo. It's an interesting touch. It's such a cool Easter egg that you wouldn't know unless you know. Next up, let's talk about the 570S's trunk. It's up here, of course, and with exotic cars, sometimes it's hit or miss on trunk size. Well, the 570S hits. It actually has a rather large trunk. It's surprisingly big for a car like this. The interesting thing, though, is not the size, but rather the fact that there is a 12-volt charger plug in there. It's so strange. This car doesn't have a glove box, but they were like, yeah, stick a plug in there so you can charge your phone while you're just hanging out in a parking lot. Now, interestingly, the 570S's trunk doesn't have one of those little latches you can pull to get out in case you get kidnapped and stuffed in the trunk. Although such an exit system is mandated by federal law. Instead, in the McLaren, they just have a little button that blinks a green light every once in a while. So, if you ever get kidnapped and stuffed in a 570S trunk, now you know how to get out. Next up, I want to discuss the design of the 570S's doors, although they're so crazy, I don't even really know where to begin. This panel in here is not a painted panel for style as I thought before I actually saw this car. It's actually an inch or two inside the body. So there's one body panel up here, another body panel down here, and then this panel, which is inside it, and it kind of opens to this air intake.
Also unusual, I bet you didn't know there was a huge hole between the 570S's body panel and the actual door itself, and yet there it is.
Next up, let's talk wipers. The wipers have a weird discrepancy in them. Namely, the wiper on the driver's side is about 2.5, 3 feet long, whereas the wiper on the passenger side is less than a foot. It's a very strange discrepancy, although it isn't as large as the one in the Honda Fit. Yes, that's right. Go take a look at a Honda Fit, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so those are all of the many quirks and cool features of the 570S. Now it's time to get it out on the road and drive the McLaren Cayman, the McLaren Evoque, the McLaren, whatever, I'm just gonna drive it. Time to drive the 570S. One of the things you instantly think when you get inside this car is how close you are to the front of it. It's like the old NSX where you can see kind of exactly where it ends and you know exactly how close you are, which is really important if you're actually on the track. The sound is magnificent. And I admit, there's nothing like a good V8 sound, you know. Oh, and there's nothing like that acceleration. Wow. This car is quick. Oh my God. The problem is I'm in Virginia doing this, and in Virginia you get arrested for even thinking about speeding, or even thinking about driving, or even thinking about going anywhere at any sort of speed that isn't a walking pace. Once again, you know, it's an annoyance. The paddles are on the steering wheel. I swear they should be on the steering column, because then if I'm in a tight turn, I don't have to go looking for where are the paddles if I've gone hand over hand. This car is tremendously high strung. McLaren builds cars for people who don't want to chill. This car is for the kind of people who are like, no, I'm ready to drive today, so I'm going to get in my McLaren. Yeah, this car just kind of always feels like it's on. It's always kind of in 10-tense mode. Even when I have these things in normal mode, the car is still loud, the drive is still fast, it still is a pretty rough ride. Man, it's so precise. The handling is really good. The downshifts are very quick. Explosive acceleration, just massively quick. Massively quick, amazingly fast. This car feels like it's always ready to just pounce, and the NSX feels like if you want, you can kind of chill. It's just a personality thing. This car is more for the guy who has 12 cars and just wants that one car that he can just bomb down back roads on that occasional day when he wants. The thing that's amazing about this car is just how quickly... See, I just made a right on red, and there's no gap between me and the car that I turned behind. How is that? This car is just incredibly fast, unbelievably fast. The mirrors are oppressively small. I have a cargo van, Ford van behind me, and it's taken up the entire mirror. I can't see a thing otherwise. The transmission is very quick and surprisingly smooth. One thing I'm not that into about McLaren transmissions, you can really feel them downshifting as if you're not in manual mode, as you just approach a light. You can feel each sort of individual gear downshift. It's weird. The ride is harsh, there's no doubt about that. And I'm in normal mode right now, and the ride's kind of punishing. This car, it's just interesting how much more this car is clearly for high performance drivers who want to be at the limit all the time than a lot of the other exotics. The car is just so fast. And it's just so, I almost feel like I'm in a go-kart. You're so low, the car is so small, you're so far forward, more than in any other car I think I've driven. You just really feel like you're meow, meow, meow. You can really change directions like those alien fighters in Independence Day. Man, it's just so quick. It is so tremendously quick. It's funny because you think baby McLaren and you're like, well, it's gonna not be so great. You know, regular McLaren's gonna be more fun. Well, what a joke. This car is every bit as cool and as exciting. It just happens to be smaller and cheaper and not as powerful. If you don't want to go absolutely insane, you don't have to. So the McLaren 570S is beautiful. It has a ton of cool features and interesting party tricks. It is, of course, great to drive, and it's perfectly sized. And so that's the McLaren 570S. Mostly. You see, I'm a little bit worried about this thing long term. Right now, this car has only 2,000 miles on it, and it's only a year old, so it's still covered by its bumper-to-bumper factory warranty. If you want to get more coverage when that expires, I'm sure you can buy an extended warranty from McLaren, or you can get one from my friends at Exclusive Automotive Group. But what happens in 6 years, 8 years, when this thing really is as cheap as a new 911? Are you going to want to go to the Porsche dealer and buy a new 911, or are you going to want to roll the dice on a used McLaren? I don't know the answer to that question, by the way. I'm just asking it.